I made the game in 4 days for the GMTK Game Jam, but 2 of those 4 days were work days and I already had plans that weekend, so I had less than 2 full days to actually focus. Honestly, I wasn't sure I could pull it off. As far as I know, it's the biggest online game jam out there. It's perfect for people with a day job like me. You work on it before and after work and you still get to sleep in your own bed and actually get enough sleep. Before I always did it with a team, but this year, for the first time, I went solo. I think it's good training. You build the core of a game fast under time pressure. That's why keeping the scope small and the game simple really mattered this time. I didn't want to pull an all-nighter and burn down because I was back at work the day after the jam ended. In this video, I will show you how I built the game, and at the end, I will share what I do differently and what I learned. I woke up and checked the jam theme before heading to work. The theme is Countdown. I wanted at least a rough idea of what to make before I left. That way I could keep thinking about it while commuting or during breaks. 2 ideas came to mind while brainstorming. Both of them have been sitting in my notes for a while. The first one is like 60 seconds. You collect items with a time limit and build a shelter. Then you have to get inside. When the countdown ends, bombs start falling. If you survive, then you win. The second one comes from a Zelda Shrine puzzle. You tilt the board to drop balls. The more balls you drop before time runs out, the higher your score. But the first one means building a collection system and a building system, so the scope gets big fast. The UI would be a lot more complex too. And during this jam, I still have to go to work. I also have plans this weekend that I can skip. So I'm going with the second one. It's much simpler to build and it reads instantly, and because it's simple, I can put the time into the controls or game feels and the polish. Today I'm going to build a prototype and see if it's fun. If it's not, I have to think again. So here's roughly what I'm making for this jam. You move a ball down through a maze, but here's a twist. You don't control the ball. You control the maze itself. It's like putting a ball on a board and tilting the board to let it roll down. I want to add a couple of rules on top of that. One thing I'm thinking about is making the ball break if it falls too far. That stops you from just shaking the board around, kind of like dropping an egg. And then there's the jam theme countdown. There's a countdown timer and you send the ball as far as you can before it runs out. But I will also add time cubes. Grab one and you get more time. And I will place those cubes slightly out of the way, so you have to decide whether it's worth the detour. It gives you something to think about. After work, I got home and really started building. First up was the core, tilting the board to move the ball. The simple way to think about is this. You put a board-shaped maze in front of the camera and you actually rotate the board. But there are a few problems with that. The biggest one is that my maze is long and vertical. You still need a pivot somewhere. And the further the maze goes from that pivot, the more it swings, even a small tilt. So the controls would get harder to handle as the game goes on. And there could be other physics engine issues too. I wanted to keep this fast and simple, so I went a different way. Instead of rotating the board, I rotate the camera and the direction of the gravity. Now from the physics engine's point of view, the maze is static and only the ball moves. The problem with the long maze goes away. And because the maze stays fixed, it's much easier to track how deep the ball has gone. My goal for day 1 was to make the ball move naturally through the maze. That's the whole game really. So in a way, that was a prototype of the core mechanic. I moved the camera to make it look like the board was tilting, then kept tweaking the numbers until it felt natural. The good news is that when I played it myself, the controls were already fun, and I could picture it getting much better once I added a timer and the time cues. But one thing worried me, would other people feel the same way, and would it feel like the board moving and not the ball? I wasn't sure about that. On day 2, I had to leave for work early, so I couldn't build anything in the morning. Instead, I uploaded yesterday's prototype to Google Drive so I could get some people to try it. The first thing I found out is that people really did feel like it wasn't the ball moving, it was the board. I felt a little relieved. I thought, okay, now I can move on to the next step. I also put together a simple UI and got the timer and the ball breaking working. The timer definitely made things tenser. And then I suddenly got really into the ball breaking. I thought it would be great if the ball broke in a really satisfying way. I spent a bit of time on it, trying to make the break feel juicy. It was Saturday, and I already had plans, so I had to head out. I didn't start until late afternoon. My goal was to finish the whole main game loop, the title screen, the game over screen, and the ball select screen. On my way home, I thought it'd be fun and kind of funny to have different balls in the game. So I added unlockable balls for replay value and a bit more variety. Not just a plain ball, but a watermelon, an egg, or even a cactus, which isn't a ball at all. Each one behaves differently. The watermelon doesn't break easily, but it's harder to control. The egg is easy to control, but it breaks really easily, so you have to be gentle with it. But the UI took longer than I expected. I kept getting tunnel vision, chasing quality. Luckily, I cut myself a few times and stopped before I dug in too deep. I didn't want to spend much time building a title screen, so instead, I used the actual game scene as a start menu. Behind the game title, the camera slowly moves down across the stage. And when you hit start, it goes all the way back up and the game begins at the top of the maze. We used that same move for the restart, and that was pretty satisfying. And then I finally added the time cubes. When I playtested it, the whole thing suddenly felt like a real game. Now there is a way to beat the timer, so it makes you want to push deeper, and you have to decide whether or not to go for a cube. Suddenly there is a lot more to think about it. I like it. In the morning I thought there wasn't much left, so I took it easy. Then I looked up and it was almost evening. And I still had quite a lot to do. That stressed me out a bit. I checked the time after lunch and I was honestly shocked. I think I spent way more time picking sounds than I meant to. Last night, it felt like I was almost done, but even by evening, I still hadn't touched balancing or new maps. I started to feel rushed. Balancing was harder than I expected. Which value to change, how much to change it, how different each ball should feel. All of that was tricky. I used rigid body and physics material. The important part was figuring out what each value actually affects before touching it. I mostly worked with linear damping and angular damping on the rigid body and friction and bounciness on the physics material. And I was under some time pressure here because that morning I was so sure I'd be done by then. Once the balls felt balanced enough, I built more maze chunks. This time I made chunks that use the upward tilt. In some, you have to climb to reach a cube. In others, you get to decide if it's worth it. And with that, I submitted with about 3.5 hours left. Honestly, I've been pretty worn out lately, tired all the times. So before the jam started, I was pretty worried about whether I could finish. But once submitted, I felt really proud and relieved, and I thought the game turned out well. That felt good too, because I cut the scope down and kept the game simple. I had a little time for the details, and I finished later than I planned, so going to work the next day was rough, but it wasn't still worth it. I have another game I'm working on, but this jam was refreshing, and there's something satisfying about taking a game from my notes and actually building it in a short time. Game jams are fun because you finish something fast. But I think they are also good practice for a game developer. You have to figure out fast what actually makes a game fun, build it, and cut everything else. The next day, I started playing other people's games and rating them. What I regret is that I never got anyone to play test it before submitting. The day after submitted, I asked friends and people at work to try it. On day 2, I added that neutral position where the board is level. I put it so the ball could go up. But because of that, the ball doesn't come down unless you tilt the board. And a lot of people said it felt sluggish. On my own, I thought more maze variety would be more fun, but it actually hurt the speed and made the controls feel worse. And there's another thing. It matters for YouTube videos and Steam pages too, but I think I overlooked it because this was a jam. The thumbnail, the page, and the game title are pretty important. I don't really know how HIO rating algorithm works, but I only got 20 ratings, and that was a bit disappointing. If I had made a thumbnail that caught your eye and a title that got you interested, maybe more people would have rated and left comments. The rating period ended and it was time for the scores and the rankings. I kept telling myself not to care too much, but I was still a little nervous. When I submitted the game to the jam, I was just really happy that I finished it. And I was pretty satisfied with the game itself too. I think I got it to the level I had in mind. But then I got my ranking and honestly, seeing those numbers, I felt a little down for a bit. I put 4 days into this game and the rank came in lower than I hoped. But thinking about it more, it makes sense that art and narrative scored low. I think that's just the kind of game I made. I designed it as a hyper-casual game from the start. If those scores were high, that would actually be weird. And I barely touched the art because I was focused on the core loop. Creativity was somewhere in the middle. The mechanic itself is a bit different from a normal game, so I got why that felt a bit creative. But it doesn't really come out of the countdown theme. Next time when the theme drops, I want to make something unique that really comes out of it. But I found out that my enjoyment rank has been going up every year. That's the part I focused on this time. And it made me feel like I'm actually getting better. That helped. And the most important thing is I did finish it. I will write down what I do differently and do better next time. Sure, I might feel empty for a bit or lose some motivation, but making games is what I love. Losing interest in that because of one rank, that makes no sense. In this video, I talked about how I built my game during the GMTK Game Jam and what I learned from it. Honestly, I was pretty worried at the start. I wasn't sure I could finish in 4 days, going to work and doing it alone. But I kept the scope small and cut what I had to cut. And I made it in time. Making a simple game actually gave me room to care about the details. There's still plenty I wish I would done better though, especially not getting anyone to play test it and not putting enough thought into the thumbnail and the title. I'll make sure to handle those next time. But I learned a lot at the same time, so I will write it all down and get my energy back and get back to the game I was working on. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.